Welcome to Awakened with Victoria Bond. I'm your host, Victoria, and I am absolutely honored to bring you this podcast where we will be getting raw, real, turning up consciousness, removing the old energies that do not align, and turning up our capacities as human beings and spiritual beings. I will be bringing you mediumship. I will be bringing you channels. I will be bringing you points of view that will shift your perspective and realign your body, your mind, and your soul. Enjoy this ride. This comes from my heart to yours, and know that while you're listening to this, indeed, you are helping to create this. Enjoy the ride, and I'll see you inside. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. We have a special guest, Kim Coffin, who is the founder of Get Your Sexy Back. Thank you for joining us today, Kim.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here to play, to explore.
Yes, and I'm excited about this conversation because I have so many questions for you.
Perfect.
Before
I'm
we
a generator. I like questions.
Yeah, and you're like a wealth of
responding.
knowledge. You're a wealth of knowledge, and that is why I'm so pumped to have you on the show today. And there's just so many questions that I'm sure my audience really want to hear. So before we get into that, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you and what it is you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Kim Coffin. I am an empowerment and sexuality coach, very somatic, body-based, trauma-informed, because I don't think we can separate out sexuality and trauma. It is so interlaced and weaved together. And so I love to dive into this embodiment, this sexuality, this sacredness. I'm also a sex, love, and relationship coach, certified with Layla Martin, a graduate of School of Womanly Arts with Mama Gina, and founder of Get Your Sexy Back. But I really specialize in female sexuality, playing with the sacredness that's within, Tantric Sex, playing with Tantra in the realms of sacred sexuality, and relationship transformation, and really allowing the humans that I work with just to reconnect into who they are so that they can step into their absolutely unshakable with, unfuckable with, unapologetic power.
I love it. Okay, so one of the things when I was stalking your website for the 10th time, one of the things I noticed was, that word trauma that you just brought up, working with the trauma and then the pleasure. So don't quote me, but of course, this is the way that I perceived it. Was I feel like this is what people need to know about, because we see sex and pleasure as good, if you know what I mean, and trauma is bad. So many people are running from the trauma. But this kind of polarity or duality, or however you want to explain it, these go hand in hand and they work together. So I'd love to know your perspective of the trauma and the pleasure and how they actually marry together.
There's so much in that question that I loved. You might have to reframe the end, but I got stuck on the running from their trauma, right? Like we can't. We cannot run from our trauma. It is in us. It is in our body. It's like it's its living, breathing own entity. And the more we fight it and the more we resist it, the bigger it gets. And it just lives there and it shows up. So it's going to show up subconsciously, the way that we're reacting, the way that we're ticked off, the way that we're triggered. It's going to keep showing up. And this is one of the tantric philosophies as well, which I know you want to ask more about, and we'll go all the way into that. But there's this piece of we can't resist it. If it's there and we fight it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And when we lean into it and we welcome it and we embrace it and we allow it to move through our body, we allow ourselves to feel it and then alchemize it like with pleasure, which is like the best way to do it. And allow then the two to mix, allow the two to be. almost all at once. And that's what we can do through sacred sexuality practices and so forth. I guess I kind of came around in a way that actually did kind of answer your question, but we can use that, and you can ask another question and go deeper into that of what more you want to know.
I just, really wanted to see that perspective, because of course, this is what I do in a completely different way, is the shadow work for, one of the ways that we can explain that, and I know there's a big umbrella with that shadow work, but really being able to open our consciousness up to allow anything that is no longer here to serve us to come up, to be seen, to be witnessed, to be, I like how you said, alchemized. And it's kind of that whole like marrying together. Obviously, we're not going, okay, trauma, I want to experience you over and over and over again. It's that kind of alchemizing and going, how can we transform? How can we work with this? And I do believe with my own sexual trauma that it's a really interesting concept of how we push away the trauma. We push away the shame and the guilt and the rejection, whether that's from religion, whether that is from an experience, a situation, or somebody else's projection. So I love how you have that in your, when you explain what you do, it's like, well, hang on, we work through these parts of us so then we can open up to these other parts. So I'd love you to maybe dive a little bit more into how working through the trauma, or however you would like to explain that, actually helps us to open up to more pleasure.
Absolutely, because very often we are blocking ourselves. So our body actually keeps the score for absolutely everything. Like every single little message we received, the look that maybe the mean girls gave us in school, or the way they treated us, the way a guy, whether we were first dating or not, like catcalled us or said something or did something, or even if we go all the way through and like penetrated us before we were early, like before we were ready, too early. So all of these things bring on this contraction in our body, and we are holding this contraction. Like this contraction is there, and we keep layering more contraction on top of more contraction, because look where we live. Like embracing our body and our female sexuality and our feminine and our sensual is not, it's dangerous, right? Like many humans, generally the female kind, were burnt, they were persecuted, they were, drowned. We have this living in our bodies. So we can't just ignore it. We can't just run from it. We get to start to see. And I like to work very somatically with my clients. So it's like, okay, I really want to, ask for what I want in the bedroom per se, but I'm feeling really, really shy or squeamish about it. And oh my gosh, like that's way too much. So we can actually start to check in then. Okay, well, what's going on in your body? What do you notice? What do you notice in your felt sensations? What do you notice coming up? What do you feel? And we can actually go back and start tracking these pieces and start listening to the body and listening to what the body wants to share. What is coming up might be a story, might be a past life, could be many different things that come up. Could just be, this is scary. It could be an inner child. I work with a lot of inner children work as well. It could be a protector. There's so many pieces. It could be so many different paths we can go on. And I can't really say exactly how we would, but we would, start to track it, start to bring in tons of approval, tons of compassion, start to hold these pieces, as well as start to empower other pieces in your body. And if you can't find them in your body, we can go to North Stars, we can go to other places to pull in these more healing, holding, empowered energies and start to alchemize the two. And then we can start to bring in sacred sexuality. We can start to bring in that kind of pleasure. And again, we're going to have blocks and places that come up. We might have releasings, clearings. Yeah, I can go into de-armoring too. That one's really powerful. You tell me where you want to go. Did I answer your question there?
Well, there's just so many layers, like you said. And I notice this with my work, is that people come to us and they go, hey, I want to be healed. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do this. And they kind of feel like one session is going to cut it. But this is a deconditioning process, like you said, not just necessarily of this life, but within our DNA, we've had these experiences. So I loved how you brought that up, this kind of the spirituality that comes in, because we are souls and we are spirits as well as human bodies. And I love the body. I love the embodiment. And that's where we get to do the healing, is within this body, within these practices, and the different layers are so important, because there's the different timelines that are overlapping. And then, it's just a big thing. And I know for myself in my own journey of sexuality, which I believe I'm still in, like, I feel like I've just touched the surface.
It's a journey.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been married for 11 years today. I've been with my husband for 22 years. And I believe we're just starting the journey on a different perspective, from a different viewpoint. Yeah. So one of the questions I do have for you is, so this is something I love as well, is you talk about self-pleasure. You talk about pleasure practices. You talk about getting to know yourself, and then, of course, in your relationship. And I really tapped into this before this conversation, which, and the question I was asking my guides was like, isn't that too much of a simple question to ask him? And the question is like, why do we have to find ourselves and our own pleasure before a relationship? And I know so many people listening right now would be like, oh, that's such a basic question. And what I received back from my higher self or my guides or whomever was speaking was, yes, it's a simple question, but the thing is, how much of us are actually living it? How many of ourselves are putting our pleasure, practice, and our own sexuality, our own self-love before coming in and having that pleasure and intimacy within our relationships?
Mm-hmm. There's 5,000 questions in there, and I love them all. Love them
Sorry.
all. Yeah. And I wanted, even what we were sharing just a few moments ago before this part is, it can sound heavy, right? And I love that you're like, okay, what about the sacred pleasure and sacred sexuality? It's not heavy, because it can have moments. Let's just say it can have moments, especially if a acute trauma comes up or something, big that comes up. But it's like this journey, it's like these layers. And when we play, and there's a few different reasons, like we're using pleasure and sacred sexuality because it's fun, because it turns us on, because it juices us up, right? And it's also calming and holding our nervous system. So that is another huge thing that we want to bring in, because even if we're doing nervous system regulation work and going deep into, different things that we're releasing in our traumas in our bodies, we're using pleasure to find them, but we're also using pleasure to soothe them. We're doing both. And yeah, the reason of going into this sacred sexuality and playing with this work and playing with it in our bodies is we haven't been taught it. Like we haven't been taught that our pleasure is ours. We haven't been taught that what we're feeling is even okay. For many humans, many female identifying humans, we're like, ooh, I feel turned on right now, but I'm with a group of women. Does that mean that I'm lesbian or bisexual? Or what does this mean? No, that's just like, that is your life force juice turned on, juicy energy. That is you. And you get to use this energy to create, and you get to use this energy to follow your purpose, to nourish your children, to nourish yourself, to nourish your relationships, whatever that may be. So it's really important we keep coming back to ourselves, to keep coming back to being home in our body, trusting our body, tapping into the innate intuition that is already within our pelvic bowl. And that, again, comes from sacred sexuality. So in sacred sexuality or sexual or self-pleasure practices, whatever we want to call it, they're all in the same thing, just different words to use it. We're also cultivating trust with our body. By doing so, we're also cultivating safety with our body. By doing so, our intuition's getting stronger. By doing so, we're like, ooh, that's not right for me. This is right for me. Like we know. And then we're also it's like we're going deeper and deeper into who we are. And we get to this point where I don't care if the world's falling apart around me. I'm okay. Do you see all the different sides we're hitting it from?
Yeah.
And that's the why too. That is the why. Are we doing this alone and solo and not always in relationship? Because if we bring it into relationship, we've got two inner children, we've got two past lives, we've got two bodies that are right here that are getting triggered by different things with different experiences. And it's just, I hate to say it, but it's a big clusterfuck. Like it's a clusterfuck. There's enough shit to deal with on our own. We get to
Yeah.
come home in our body and lock in and get grounded and secure and turned on and juiced up and all of those things in ourselves first, even if we're in a relationship right now,
That's
because
beautiful.
that's
And
us.
yeah, exactly. It's us. And like you said, it's our creativity. It's that kind of sacral, that sacral, where it's very much like your creativity is in there, and this is what I also bring into my coaching, is what turns you on and what juices you up when you're creating a program, whether you are thinking about moving or you're buying a dress. Does that dress turn you on, or are you buying it because it's on special? The way that we can listen to our intuition is to actually listen to what is the orgasmic energy, which is that
Yes.
turn on, and that's the creativity. And if you're going straight into a relationship, like many of us do, I was 16 years old, I instantly am in somebody else's aura, didn't even know that was a thing, and I am responding to the needs of that. And my husband was a child, because he was I was 16, he was 17, and we're responding to their trauma, and we're responding to them. And especially if you're a generator, you're responding to the outer rather than the inner. And we've got to train ourselves how to respond to ourselves, depending obviously on your own energetics. But I think it's
And then
just
there's
so important.
messaging, conditioning, what society says, how a good girl's going to show up, how a good mom's going to show up. Like there's so much shit to get through. We just really need to come home in our bodies.
Yeah. And I think I love how they call it the unsexy work, because it's like, get your sexy back, is beautiful, but it's not just like, okay, pleasure. It's like, hang on a minute. What is that coming up in the subconscious, that if I was able to see it and receive it and accept it and witness it, observe it, I was able to, like you said, alchemize it and come into a more potent part of me. The thing that I really heard in that as well is, if when you said you know more about yourself and your intuition, when you go deep within, and if you have never had that experience, like I had not had that experience when I first got with my boyfriend, now husband, then you don't know what you want. And I'm sure you get a lot of people that are like this. And I've got to say, it's only since diving into this kind of, I don't want to say topic, because I think it's a way of life, myself, that I've realized I've been asking myself questions. What do I like? What do I like? What don't I like? Da, 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 da. And I hate being rubbed. I hate when my husband rubs my back or rubs my shoulder. My family are full of generators and many gens. I'm a projector. I'm very quiet. I like stillness. I do not like noise. I like to be alone. I like to sleep alone. I'm very sensitive as a psychic medium. And I just say, please don't rub me. I actually don't like it. But he's never known that, ever. So last night we were watching TV, and he has his hand on my ankle. He's sitting on the ground. I'm lying on the couch, because I like the whole couch to myself, because I like space. And he's got his hand on my ankle, and it felt so fucking good. And then he took it off after about 20 minutes. I said, hey, babe, do you mind putting your hand back on my ankle? I love it. And I'm 39 years old. And I've just realized I don't like being rubbed. I just like someone, if the energy is lovely and calm, just holding their hand somewhere on my body. And I'm not even talking about sexuality here. I'm talking about where I feel safe.
An ankle's very grounding, right? Your feet are very grounding, right? So that's very powerful. Yeah. You mentioned in there as well, well, there's so many pieces. Like there's the needs, there's what do I want? Like we're not even taught to know what we want. We don't even have space to know what we want. We are thrown into this go, 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 go. Come on, work harder, school harder, all of this world. And then it might be babies. Who knows what's next? But it's like, we don't know what we want. Like, we haven't even slowed down to check.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were talking also, there was a piece about, the trauma and the heaviness. Yes, we're working on that, but we're not chipping at it. It's not something that we're going at. We gotta fix. We gotta go, 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 go. Because one, it's causing more trauma by doing so.
Yeah.
Two, it's dysregulating our nervous system. Like, it's very slow and gentle process. There is going to be moments if we hold actual sexual trauma that we haven't looked at. But if we can build up again this energy body, this confidence, this empowerment in ourselves to hold ourselves, we can learn how to, dip in and dip out, and then dip in and dip out. And we're always bringing in, there's kind of a ratio, like two, technically it's 3-1. And if we're going to do a ratio, but it's like two amazing, pleasure-filled empowerment, really like juicy practices to any time you're going to go in and do more of a healing practice, or do more of a little trauma, something coming up kind of thing. Could be, we were talking about de-armoring briefly before. De-armoring is a practice where we can use either our fingers or our tools, or eventually our partner. We can use crystal dildos, whatever it may be, glass dildos, and we can start to slowly hold our fingers in certain areas. We hold more of our sexual trauma, or any kind of other trauma, it doesn't have to be sexual, in our more sexual areas. So our vulva, our vaginal canal, our lower belly, our breasts, our throat. So we can use these tools, like I was talking about, fingers or other tools, to very gently like start dropping in and feeling what's there, like getting in touch to, what does this feel like? Is there a sound that wants to come out? Is there something that needs to be released that is stuck here? So de-armoring is a powerful practice that combines breathwork and pleasure and light, gentle touch and sound and all the tantric tools. It's beautiful, but you don't want to do that all the time. You want to use other beautiful, turning on, sexual, sensual practices to fill you up, so that you can dip in and see what's there.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, because for me, even my coach who I had for 2 years, she was always talking about pleasure practices, and I was always like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, I'm a busy mom, entrepreneur, blah, 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 blah. But then when I decided to start writing my first book, and I watched some of her trainings on writing a book, one of the whole trainings was literally about how she will masturbate and go for walks and do pleasure practices even before she gets to writing the book. And here I thought I was going to be, okay, it's book writing day, better get into the writing. But actually,
get into your body first.
Get into your body. So I'm actually kind of new to this. I've always done yoga and went for walks, but I've always had a goal in mind, because I'm a very, I want to say I'm an achiever. There's parts of me that is very, I go to boot camp and, I am an achiever. I'm a kind of an A-type energy a little bit. Also, I'm a projector, so I like to lay back and I practice coming into my feminine. But the interesting thing is, since writing my book, I have the whole day to play, and I eat food and I have cacao and I have spas and I may have sex, or I may just dance, and then I go into writing. But my question is to you is, what are some of the ways for those of us who are so new at this? What are some of those more gentle, like you just said, things that we can do to come into our pleasure? Because I feel like some of them are so subtle that we may dismiss them because we have been in this conditioned world of go, go, go.
You just listed a whole pile of them. You're like, I didn't do any pleasure practices, but I had some cacao and I meditated and I worked out and I had sex. I'm like, pardon? Like, I don't know. There was a few other things in there
just to reframe, I'm speaking. I know what my ones are now,
Gotcha.
but I think for our audience, there's like the dancing type of thing and the enjoying all of that stuff there, the enjoying the water or whatever. I don't think people actually understand, because they're always going for the orgasm, or they're going for the goal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very goalless. So I already wrote that down. I'm like, goalless. You said that earlier, like anything in the tantric practices and playing with sacred sexuality is goalless. There is no goal of an orgasm. It is following our pleasure. It is following our turn on. It is slowing down. It is seeing what feels good. And this could be in bed or on a mat, actual pleasure practice, but this also could be out for a walk. right? It could also be in the bathtub or in the pool or in the ocean, like whatever that may be. It's being, it's the being, it's the being in presence, it's the connecting. And I think that's why many of us do need pleasure practices and scheduled time. Like I actually have a pleasure practice time on my calendar every day, but I could pick breath work. I could pick a sensual practice. I could pick a sexual practice. I can pick so many different practices, whatever my body needs. And I know how to listen to what my body needs at this point. And that's what I teach my clients to do as well. Because again, the body is brilliant. It's going to tell me what I need right here, right now. And all of these different practices, all are pleasure practices. They all bring us back to the body, back to turning us on, back to activating our pleasure, back to feeling, back to being, less doing. So I think that's why we need those practices, because probably thousands and thousands of years ago, this was just part of everybody's regular routine, right? There was rituals, there was practices, there was meditations, there was breath work, there was being. That is a huge word.
And I think it could be anything from reading a book and lying down with, having a cup of tea and reading a book, or spending some time alone, especially if you're a busy mom. I know everyone's busy, but busy mums that are side hustles, all the working, all the things, just being alone. And I do love the whole dancing and moving the body. I know you do a lot of somatic stuff as well. And it's just slowing down. And I want to emphasize that word, slowing down and being in presence is what you said. And it's very much a thing that people are afraid of. I know it's something I was afraid of, and people will listen to my podcasts. I get messages from people going, I just listened to 4 podcasts while I'm gardening and then doing this and this and this. And I'm like, well done. Like, that's very kind of sacred masculine. You're getting things done. You're multitasking. But at the same time, it's like, if that's what you need, that's beautiful. But at the same time, what if you just gave yourself some space and lay on the grass for a moment for 10 minutes, or if you needed to come into that divine feminine. So I loved what you said, Kim, about listening to what you actually require and scheduling it in. I love that. And going, what would I like to do? Because I even put myself in the thing of like, well, my pleasure practice must be dance, and then it must be touch, and it must be things sensual, because I'm a spleen. So I'm very sensitory, but that's actually, it's so much more broader than that. It can be the breath work, which is more, it's kind of more active, right? The breath work I is more active, but then also dancing, the music could be so slow, or yoga could be more active or more slow. So I just really want to, I know it seems so basic, but coming back to that self kind of pleasure practice, or whatever you want to call it, is listening to what you need. Maybe it's raunchy sex. Maybe it's like wearing something real sexy and going on and doing a live. Maybe that's a part of your pleasure practice. What do you want? What is your intuition telling you? I reckon that's a huge part of it. Just so many pieces and so many things that we can do, from touch to dance to drinking to eating. I think those easy everyday things as well. Like, we're going to go out for lunch today to celebrate our anniversary. And rather than going, I want burger and chips and get my money's worth, it's like, what if I could have a little glass of champagne, or go somewhere where I can really enjoy the quality? What if I could take a moment and go, fuck it, I'm going to have a whole hour just in presence with my husband, not talking about the future stuff. Maybe we want to reminisce about the past. Maybe we just want to be in the presence and be who we are, not the mum, not the entrepreneur, not the wife, not talking about, the to-do list. But what if we could just, one of the things my husband likes to talk about is, he does like to talk about sex. What do you like? And I go really shy and go, can we not talk about that? Yeah.
Yes. And that is exactly, there's 2 pieces in here. There's all of these pieces of pleasure that we can follow on our day-to-day. Yes, exactly. Like, do I want my water in a wine glass? Do I want to go for a walk? That is a part of pleasure that, yes, we're always trying to bring into our day to fill us up, to hold us. And then there's the sacred sexuality piece, which I actually consider a little different piece, because that is where we are really slowing down, where we are really reconnecting to our body, to our sensuality, so when you keep practicing in sacred sexuality, there's definitely this huge spiritual component that comes in. There is this connection when you can get into peak pleasure states that feel like you're high as fuck and you haven't taken anything. There's pieces that you can get into, and then there's parts now that you can go into an orgasm. This is, I'm speaking from my own experience, and it's taken, a while to get to it, where you can go into a peak place where it's long and expanded and open, and it feels like you are totally also playing with the universe, like with it all, like it's just is. So there's almost like three corners to everything I kind of play with, which is, yes, pleasure, fill us up, bring it in, play with it on the day-to-day. And then there's the sacred pleasure, what I would probably call it, the sacred sexuality, that piece. And the reason I have worked with this piece, because I found it on my own journey. To me, it is the biggest piece of our body, of what do you want to, play with today? What do you want me to do to you? Whatever that may be. Our sexuality is the biggest piece that we have been disempowered in for thousands of years. So it's also the fastest piece I have found that we actually can go back into, to reclaiming our power, to not being shy when these conversations come up, to being open to, there's so much. There's so many different facets and so many different levels of this work. And then all of that other pleasure you were talking about is also nervous system regulating.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because it's like the day-to-day is the pleasure practice kind of thing, and then the sacral sexuality, and what I'm hearing is more that slowing down the actual practice.
Yeah, so it could be a jade egg practice. It could be a sensual practice. Like, there's so many different practices it can be. But when we bring in touch to our own bodies, when we bring in pleasure, when we just start to track our breath, so in Tantra itself, we're bringing in a whole pile of different keys, but some of the big keys are bringing in the breath. Like, even when we are eventually, not always in the beginning, it's really hard to like start bringing in breath when you're having sex with somebody. Like, yes, we're breathing, but conscious breath. But first, bring it into your own practice. Use your breath to move your sexual energy. Use your breath to play, to notice, oh, that's feeling like really heavy in my chest right now. I'm going to breathe into that for a moment. So using our breath is fabulous. That's a really big key to play with in tantric practices, as well as bringing in sound. So then we can actually go into, we're doing a full body pleasure practice right now. Maybe we're giving a breast massage. Maybe it could be anything, right? You actually get to listen to your body. But then you can inhale and feel on the, inhale, okay, what does my body want to sound? And then bringing in sound and using our sound to allow our body almost like to tell us what it wants to release. And then you can also, and that sound may flip and flop. It might be like, oh, it wants to like moan right now. And in a second, it might be like laughing in pleasure. And then it wants to cry. Like, there's so many pieces. We just don't know what's going to show up in a practice. And then another big, big key would be movement, allowing your body to move and to be free, unstuck, however it wants.
I love this so much, and I can see how it may take a little while to build up to being confident enough to even tell your partner what you want, even to tell yourself what you want, right? There's so much shame
a lot of the
around
time
masturbation.
we don't know what we want in the beginning. Many women are like, so this is where we get to explore.
Yeah, I've had so many people come to me when I first started coaching a few years ago. I would have retreats and stuff like that, and I started talking about sex and connection. And because in my own world, I noticed that if I felt disconnected from my husband, we had to come together somehow, just with touch, right? It didn't have to be sex, but just with touch, just with a hug, I all of a sudden felt connected again. But when I had people coming to me and we started having conversations about relationships and different things and whatnot, what came up in these retreats were, and they were not sex retreats, they weren't sensual, they were more like inner self awareness retreats. And what came up was so many people had not orgasmed before and during sex, or they had never ever kind of touched themselves in front of their partner, or they've never talked about masturbation, or they had been really been chastised. Is that the word? What's the word when you get in trouble?
Chastised. Yeah.
Chastised.
And a lot of people have sex under the influence, right? It's performative.
Yeah. Well, one of my clients, she had literally been, at 5 years old, she was found touching herself in her own room with her blankets over, and her mum ripped the blankets off and gave her a hiding. And so what we were able to go through in that retreat was just to even talk about it, transformed everything for her. And now, years later, she has a great sexual relationship with her partner. The shame has gone. He knows what she needs. All these are just the conversation itself. But the thing that blew my mind is I thought I was so reserved because I used to have to use alcohol to actually even have sex with my husband. I reminded him of that recently, and he goes, "Really?" And I said, "In my 20s, I had to have 2 bottles of wine before I would even let you touch me." And then because I wanted to be wild or whatever. And one of the things I noticed is some people have never even touched themselves. They won't even go there. Like, so there is this trauma, like we've spoken about a lot in this episode, but that touch, that stillness, that coming back to yourself, and being, again, I want to emphasize being slow and booking that in for yourself to and even speaking to someone like yourself who can hold all of that and help you through that layer by layer by layer by layer. It doesn't have to be intrusive.
It's intrusive.
Gentle, it's really, really gentle. So can we talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, unless there's something else you want to add to that, into the tantric? I know you just touched on it, but you've kind of just explained the difference between the pleasure practice, the sacral sexuality, and I'm really curious about the tantric, because I've been told by a beautiful psychic medium, a channel, that I'm going to get into that a lot more, and I have no frickin' idea what she's talking about, really.
Yeah. And so Tantra is also called like sacred sexuality. So I think you said sacral, which it is sacral, but it's actually sacred sexuality is what I'll refer to it as. So Tantra, sacred sexuality. Tantra, which would be, a spiritual path, and there's tantric yoga, and then there's also tantric sexuality. A lot of the time in my marketing, I have to say tantra, because if I put sex in there, Facebook shuts me down. But most people who are following me know that I'm doing sacred sexuality, aka tantra. Sometimes I'll call it sensuality, because again, Facebook can get really mad at, and social media can get mad at certain words like sexuality. So when we're practicing tantric sex and sacred sexuality, we're using a whole pile of different things. But yes, sometimes it can be very confusing. You're like, okay, what are you playing with? This portal, or when you said chakras, whatever it may be. We are bringing in that turn on. We are bringing in that sacred touch to what degree our body wants that day. So it may be that somebody's starting sacred sexuality practices, but they're like, I'm doing like fully clothed on, like hands hovering over a body, maybe not even touching. And I'm just going to still use a practice as is. Other people may decide to put hands on body over top of clothing. Other people will undress again to their level of comfort and may, put hands on body. They may not. Depends what a body is asking for. Depends what a body is holding. But sacred sexuality practices have different levels. There's all these different levels that we can go into, all of these different places that we can explore. And yeah, it can get a little confusing. I am trained in it now, so it's not confusing. But that is why I love just in the beginning being guided through a practice. Allow me to, somebody to moderate a practice, just like a workout, something like that. Just like if you're going to yoga, there's an instructor per se, and you can just follow along. What I think we get caught up a lot in is our judgment. Oh, we're not doing it right. Oh, am I doing it at all? There should be doing this. Judgment. expectations, those goals, all of these things that are coming in. So I practice I used to be every single day. Now it's not always every single day. Actually, since I had COVID this year, I just need to practice some other things that I've been bringing in and playing with, kind of thing. So it just depends. I'm also sleeping in way longer since I had COVID. Plus I'm in menopause or perimenopause. So there's a whole pile of things going on. But I think the thing to do is really just get in a practice, like get in a place where you can start exploring, start seeing, and you can take it as deep as you want to go or not. But it's the practice of coming home in your body, the practice of activating your turn on, the practice of allowing and giving permission to for your body to release whatever it needs to release that day and fill you back up, right? With the turn on and so forth. And really just reclaiming that natural sensual self. So it's so hard to say exactly what is a practice because it's different every single time.
And is that, so the tantric or tantra, however you say it, is that essentially the sacred practice? Are they one of the
Tantric
same?
Tantric sex would be the sacred sexuality practices.
Yes. Okay.
And many of us will call it Tantra at this point, if we already know that we're working in a sexual realm. But there's other parts of Tantra that aren't sexual. So I'm trained in neo and classical parts of Tantra and Tantric sexuality. So there's many parts, even in my regular coaching, that'll have no sexuality, but they still have Tantric components. So it's a both and.
Beautiful. I kind of always felt like it was different sex positions. And this is the thing that scared me in the past was when this beautiful medium channel said, you'll be doing more Tantra stuff or Tantric. And I was like, cool. And the first thing that went to my head was, fucking hell. Like, excuse my language. I was like, really?
That's
like,
perfect.
Even like just actually getting in the mood and the energy and
That's too much work.
It's
too much work.
work.
It's not work.
And I'm a projector. Like
thing.
I don't ever have like a let's go have sex. I've never initiated because I just don't have that kind of sacral urge. When I'm in it, when I get kind of like connected and it's very spiritual, sex is always very, very spiritual for me. Otherwise it's just, it is what it is. And I'm not really into it at all. Right. But it's kind of like, well, now it's this spirituality connection. But what I love about what you've said with everything is that it's where you're at is where you're at, and it's perfect where you're at. And then you can build up on that without any pressure, because you might be in your summer, right? You might be like, yeah, I'm ovulating. I'm just feeling raunchy. I want my boobs out and my red lips. I'm feeling sexy and my dark eyeliner. Like I'm like that in my summer. And then now I'm talking about the menstrual kind of flow here. And then I come into I think I'm in my autumn now, like coming into my winter. And I'm like, oh, I just want to cozy up, and I'm very, very like barefaced and, hair down, and I want to put on my woolly jerseys, but you can still have those deep, beautiful connections sexually, but they're not so like raunchy, if you know what I mean. This is just kind of,
might be more nourishing, right? Filling you up, holding you, comforting, very, very nourishing. Yeah. And that's why you get to learn all of the different practices, because I love that you just kind of went through the seasons. Yes, you can go through the sexual seasons, you can go through the monthly seasons, you can go through the seasons in your orgasm, you can go the seasons in your turn on, you can go through the seasons in your relationship. Like there's all of these seasons. And to understand them and to work with them and to play with them is important. And yeah, there's no funky sexual positions to play in tantric sex, at least not with me.
Good. It's good to know. That must be more that Kama Sutra kind of
depends.
Positions. So I also want to just go back to what you said and highlight something where you said, like, actually just in a pleasure practice or whatever, is to actually just hold a particular part of your body if that feels good. And I did this recently when I did a half-day retreat for a pleasure practice, and we just held our hands over our pubic bone, over that area, and it felt so nurturing. I wasn't touching, I wasn't prodding, I wasn't, penetrating. I was just there holding and breathing, and I felt so soothed.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like this would be a really good tip for those who feel like they've turned off everything down below because
they might feel numb.
Yeah. And I'm sure you get a lot of people that come to you and go, I'm numb. What
a
is
lot
going
of
on?
women are numb. Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of women
And so by doing that, it's so gentle. And at first it might be like, oh, what am I doing? But just by holding your hand there, or the other one is holding the hands on the breasts in the shower and just breathing. I do that myself and I go, wow, like this actually feels really good. And I feel really nurtured. But sometimes I get a little bit of a wince from myself, like and then I go, okay, well, you don't need to start there. You can start with your wrist and work your way up and squeeze and breathe and massage your own head, stuff like that.
Yeah, you're describing, like, to me, is learning how to see what your body wants, learning how to listen to that intuition of, okay, I want to be touched this way. Oh, wait, this is done. I want to be touched this way now. There's so many reasons we can use these practices, and we can use them for manifestation. We can use them to get clarity on our desires. We can use them just for pleasure. We can use them to release, right? Trauma, shame, conditioning. We can use them to go just deeper into messages. I could do the same practice. I could do a beginner practice even, and still have an exquisite, like, holy shit moment. And I could do the exact same practice every single day for a year, and I'd never have the same experience. There's, do you know what I mean? Like, it just is. So there's so many different reasons and ways to use these practices. Yeah.
So just another question, because I know this time has gone so fast. When we are going into this journey ourselves, and I know you, as you know, I've just been going through this journey myself this year, really, when it came to writing my book. How do we communicate to our partner that we want to discover ourselves sexually? Because I know, I mean, I've had the conversation with my partner. We're really, really close anyway. We've been together since we were kids, but it's like, I know that some women, when they come to me and they do the whole spirituality thing, they're afraid that if they change, that it may change their relationship. So I'm sure that's something common that you get. So what would you say to those women that go, yeah, that's great, but how am I supposed to say to my husband, well, actually, I don't want to have sex. I actually want to just spend some time with myself, get to know my body, and I'll let you know what I like. And because it's a completely different relationship for so many people.
Yeah, there's so many parts to that too, because, if it's going to freak out your nervous system to tell your partner that, then don't tell them yet, right? Like, obviously you're not ready to, right? If they're not going to receive it well, you don't need to be, attacked and take all that on right away. And then there's the part of, okay, I'm ready to talk to them. It's part of the grounding also, right? Of learning how to ground in your body so that you get to that part too, where you're like, no, I'm confident enough to say it. Like, I wouldn't push anybody to say it right away. And sure, it may change your relationship. It may make it to be the most exquisite, connected, alive relationship ever. And it also, you may get to a point where you're like, yeah, this isn't serving me anymore. I've invited them on the path, and I'm like, hey, come play with me in this realm. And they don't want to. But in the beginning, no matter what, it starts with you. It starts with you. And they have their own conditioning. They have their own messaging around what that means. They have their own shame. You don't want to get to your deathbed and go, I have taken care of everybody else. I have done everything everybody's told me to do. I've been the good woman, the good mom, the good grandmother, the good employee, the good wife, the good whatever partner. But what have I done for me? Right? Like, it starts with you. And you'll actually see that you will be the better mother. You will be the better employee or employer. You will be the better partner. It makes you better by actually slowing down and being with yourself. And some partners are on board and some aren't. Most of the time, though, they generally join.
That's actually a perfect answer, Kim, because it's like, well, there's no emergency.
No.
And for myself being, like I say, I call myself a high achiever, and that's more like because I'm very dominant in everything I do. Like, I want it and I want it yesterday, type of thing. So the minute I was like, oh, the sexuality, this trauma, I got to go clean that up. And then I want to book in with, you know, a sexual coach, you know what I mean? Someone like yourself. I need these conversations. The first thing I do is go to my husband. So I've decided that I'm going to do this, you know, but not everyone is like that, because it's not even the high achiever. That was a wrong word. It was more like a dominant energy that likes to get things done straight away. And I do not like procrastinating on anything, but not everyone's like that. Some people are like, I don't know how I would even approach that, or I don't want to be laughed at, because you don't know what the dynamics are. And my husband is the most gentle, beautiful person I've ever known in my whole entire life. He there's no way he would ever pressure me or force me to do anything. He's just very quiet and listens and holds me and all the things. But the different dynamics, it is very layered, because there's so many different dynamics in different relationships. So what you said was perfect. Come back to yourself. Be where you're at. And when you feel strong and grounded in yourself and confident in yourself, and you want to bring that into your relationship, having those radically honest conversations can create so much more. I think that my sexual relationship now, and my relationship in general, after 11 years of being married, 2 children, 22 years together, broken up a few times, had some gnarly fights, you know, as you would in 22 years, and being a child, essentially a teenager, I think it's the best I've ever had, my relationship now. I'm like more in love with my husband every day, because I'm nice to him. He is, and this is what I teach as well, is that you got to treat your partner like they're your best friend. Because would you stay with you? You know what I mean? Like, would you be friends with you? And we have to actually treat ourselves like our best friends, but then also know that our partners, we are together in this, but we are different people, and we've got to respect each other as well as ourselves. And I think that's why so many people think they get married and they become one, and they can dump on each other, or they expect things like sex or where's my dinner or whatever. But you're here to collaborate to enhance what you have, including your sexual pleasure.
Absolutely. And yeah, we do not get married and become one. We are still ourselves. And you want to get to a point where no matter what, you're okay. That could be they leave, they die, they stay, you want to leave, like whatever it may be, you want to get to a point where you are good and you know what you want. You're not just following somebody else or doing what the masses wants to do. You want to get to a point where you are you. You are authentically 100% you, because then you can listen.
So yeah, we've just started, but we have to go. It's really, really, I love what you just said, because you've got to be okay with or without them. And I ran away from my husband just before we got married the first time when I was 23, because I was like, I don't know if I can live without you. And I can't marry you knowing that I'm a 3/5. Now that I know that in human design, now I know why I did that, because I'm a great experimenter. But I was like, I can't survive without you right now, so I can't be with you. And I went and I realized that I didn't die. I did survive, but my life was so much more enhanced with Luke, and he could see me and recognize me, and vice versa. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be with people and we need to go find that out. I'm very dramatic and extreme in so many cases, but we need to be okay within ourselves. And oh my God, that's another conversation about codependency. And I'm sure you have a lot of that as well. Kim, thank you for your time. Where can we find you? We'll be popping that all in the show notes. When people want to follow you and touch base, where can they go?
Absolutely. So personally, I use my personal Facebook, Kim Coffin. You can look me up in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, and find me there. You can also on Instagram go to Get Your Sexy Back Coach with underscores in between each word. Where else? My website's easy. It's getyoursexyback.ca. It'll actually give you all the links to every single place that I hang out. You can also join Get Your Sexy Back, which is a private female identifying group for female identifying humans on Facebook. You can check out Get Your Sexy Back podcast. You see the theme here. Other than the Kim Coffin, personally, there's a theme, right? So yeah, I'd love to connect. There's so many different ways. If you want to dip your toe in slowly and start to play with this work, check out my Sacred Pleasure membership, because it's free right now. The first month's free, and it's just a way to start dipping your toe in and then make this part of your practice. And from there on out, first month's free, and then it's $44 a month to keep going. There's no long-term obligation. If it's like, okay, this is not for me, no problem, no hard feelings whatsoever. But it's a way to really start filling up your body, turning yourself on, having some fun, bringing in more pleasure, playing with sacred sexuality, releasing shame, trauma, and just really grounding and holding your nervous system. So those are the big places. I'd say let's talk. If you want to talk more about privately working together one-on-one, feel free to reach out. We can talk about that too. Those are the big places though.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all my questions. Some of them were very, can we just talk about the terminology here? And also I just wanted to address to those of you who are coming into the spirituality and the sexuality, the sensuality, the divine feminine, the masculine, all that stuff that my listeners love and are practicing. This is all a part of that, the sexuality. This is a part of that. And it's the gentleness and the willingness to see and come within. And I believe that everything is about the heart. Everything is about leading with the heart and loving yourself. And this is a beautiful layer, and being embodied in that is so important. So thank you so much, Kim. These conversations just need to keep happening, because it's a whole entire, you've done over 650 hours of the training. So this is just touching the surface, but thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Totally honored to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Listening to today's episode. I trust that you got those golden nuggets that you required to shift your consciousness, to expand your awareness, and to turn up your capacity. I invite you to share this podcast with anyone that you feel would benefit from it. And also share the golden nuggets that you have learned with your friends, family, and of course, clients. You can contact me if there's anything that you want to specifically share with me, or if there's anything you want me to specifically share on the podcast. You can check out the show notes and find me on my socials, and myself or my team will get back to you. My heart to yours. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you soon.